Step into the Gardener's Lodge with me, Mykal Hoare. Let's explore the fascinating world of gardening, nature and ecology through conversations with experts, thought leaders, passionate enthusiasts and of course, some real good friends. All from the cosy heart of the lodge. Come on in. The Gardener's Lodge podcast is created on the traditional lands of the Darug and Gundungurra people in the Blue Mountains. We pay respect to all First Nations elders, past and present. My chat today is with Clancy Lester, otherwise known as the Bee Man or beesandblossoms.oz on Instagram. He is an environmental educator. He is a native bee expert, which is exactly why I wanted to get him on. I don't know a whole lot about native bees, and I imagine you don't either. It's a subject that not a huge amount is known about. Clancy is a super interesting guy. Now, something really weird has happened since I recorded this episode. It's not weird, actually. Something really cool has happened since recording this episode with Clancy. He's blown up online. So when I recorded this, it was January. I think he had under 1,000 followers. He has gone absolutely berserk online, and I'm sure he actually needs no introduction to you if you are a part of the gardening community or a part of the ecology community online. His content is everywhere at the moment. He runs workshops and incursions with schools on how to build bee hotels and bring wildlife into the home garden and into our cities and parklands. Clancy is actually a 2025 recipient of the ABC Haywire competition, where the ABC likes to help young regional Australians that have an interesting message and a great point of view get their message out there. He has been on a whirlwind tour. He's met the Prime Minister, he's been to Parliament House, he's done countless interviews on ABC Radio, other podcasts, and I completely get it. The ABC got this one right. He is a champion. I hope you enjoy my chat with Clancy, but first, let's do our 6 rapid fire questions so that you get to know Clancy a little better. Are you ready?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay, favourite plant?
Hardenbergia or Wallenbergia. Oh, this is already hard.
Favourite way to connect with nature?
Sitting under a eucalyptus.
Beautiful. Most beautiful garden or natural landscape you visited?
Or the Heart Garden, Jack Semler.
Nice. Favourite garden tool?
Hammer.
If you could be one, plant or animal?
Animal.
When you're looking to research anything, where do you go for the most sound and reliable information?
Probably Google Scholar.
Perfect.
Oh, that was actually a bit stressful. No, we got there.
Good. No, they were good answers. They were really good answers. I love your content. You post a lot of educational videos around native pollinators and particularly native bees. Where did you actually find your passion for native bees?
It's sort of only been recently, to be really fair. Like, I think it was only a couple of years ago when I wouldn't have known as much as the average person really about native bees. What's really got me to fall in love with them is learning from the Indigenous people in northeast Arnhem Land about their connection to the native stingless sugarbag bees, and then also bringing that love back down here to Melbourne and learning all about the native bees I have on my back doorstep, really.
So how did you end up in Arnhem Land?
Yeah, so that was for my master's research project, so through university. And yeah, when the day when the supervisors were talking about the research projects for prospective students, I just heard the word Arnhem Land and I just said, what's this about? Like, I need to, like, this sounds like an absolute dream. And they said, it's going to be on native stingless bees. So I thought, yeah, I better start learning about them. And then, yeah, got the gig to go to Northeast Arnhem Land and yeah, the rest was history. It's just been an absolute dream.
At the very top, you briefly mentioned the connection between the Indigenous populations and the sugarbag bee in Arnhem Land. What is that connection?
The connection to the sugarbag bees or the stingless bees, it comes from the song lines that appear in Yolngu culture. The Yolngu people themselves are split up into 2 moieties, the Dua and the Yidija. And this is like intertwined with their marital systems and their totems and everything. And the honey from the different species of sugarbags, so the different genuses, Tetragonula and Ostroplebia, those two themselves are split up into Dua and Yidija. And so some of the honey we managed to find was the Dewar honey, which was Nilda. And this is like, yeah, something that's really important culturally because, yeah, even the whole marital systems and part of the culture and the totems and everything is all intertwined with sugar bags themselves. And obviously, there's like dreamings and songlines, or there's the sugar bag man as well. He's like one of the sort of creator entities that went through the country, and there's like a songline associated with him too.
So I suppose the bees are then really quite integral to their experience on Earth and their experience of life in general. Um, Jumping back a bit, obviously you learnt about all of that beautiful information through your university studies. But how did it come to be that you ended up studying native bees? And what's your degree?
So yeah, my degree is a Master of Bioscience. It's under the Master of Science. And I started just with a Bachelor of Science, doing a few different sort of subjects like in chemistry and math and biology, because I wasn't really sure where I was going to end up. But I sort of just ended up following like my passions growing up, watching the Steve Irwin and the David Attenborough documentaries, and yeah, just those sort of subjects always stood out to me. Getting out into nature and learning about plants and animals, it just has always fascinated me. So I've just sort of ended up following that, and it's landed me the awesome gig to get to go up to Arnhem Land and that sort of thing with my research. So I was, yeah, really lucky.
How cool. So how long did you spend up in Arnhem Land?
So I got to go up there a few times actually. We went up there initially with no intentions of doing anything, but just to connect with the people up there, get into community, and sort of begin that really respectful two-way knowledge exchange, so that they knew that we had all the right intentions before really doing anything. So that was the first initial trip. And then after that, once we'd laid out and sort of planned about how we're going to go about the research and trying to get a good spread of the like bee activity over the dry season. So we went up there a few times in the end to try and get the start, the middle, and the end of all the flowering period throughout the
Cool.
dry season. Yeah.
Amazing. So I suppose let's take it right back. So could you give me an overview of what native bees are? How many species are there? What makes them unique?
Yeah, wow. So we
Big
it
question,
could be
sorry.
here all day after that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'll have to pull me up, but so yeah, just really broadly, there's 1,650 native species that are officially, documented, but
Okay.
they think that the estimates are, well over 2,000 species. So there's a massive diversity of native bees in Australia. And so yeah, it's a lot more than just the European honeybees, which a lot of people know them, that but there's so much more than that. There's other honeybees. There's 11 species that make honey, that the stingless bees, if people have heard of them, or the sugar bag bees. There's 5 different families of bees. Um, what else have we
That's
got?
within Australia. There's 5 different families within just on the Australian continent.
Yeah, just on the Australian continent, there's 5 different families, and some of those families, like one of them, the Stenotridae, that's like pretty much unique just to Australia. Like there's only 21 species or so in that group. Then there's a seriously diverse group in Australia of short tongue bees, which are the Calidids, and this is sort of unique to Australia. Most likely because of the diversity of eucalypts, because they seem to have really close relationships with their pollination of the Myrtaceae family of flowering plants.
Okay.
And you can see that's one of the most diverse flowering species in Australia. So it makes sense that it's also really diverse of the things that are pollinating it. So the Calidid bees. It's one message I'd like to get across about native bees to the average person is that not all bees make honey. So I think that's one thing that people associate bees with, is that they make honey. But a lot of those 2,000 plus native bee species, only 11 of those actually make honey. So there's so many different native bee species which are solitary, where they live alone, and you could say nearly every female is a queen. Every female sort of runs the show and builds her own nest and lays her own eggs, collects her own pollen, does everything, does all the work. So
So she's a little one woman show.
Oh, absolutely. They just blow my mind. Yeah, that they're so independent and just can do it all.
I think maybe if people are familiar with Australian native bees, they're probably familiar with your, blue banded bees or your teddy bear bees, the ones that are kind of hit the media all the time. But what are some of the key identifiers for some of those other species of bees? What makes them stand out from other insects?
There is a lot of similarity in native bees, and that's one of the reasons why they don't really know how many species there are. Once you look under a microscope, there might be some little difference in the wing venation, or like the spurs on their legs, or where the hair is on their head. Like there's so many different little things which make the species different. So that can be hard. There's a lot of different small little black species that all look very similar. When you have a bee hotel, or if you find where they've been nesting, that's one way to tell different species apart by the materials that they use to plug the hole. So some use resin, and they're resin bees. There's some that use bits of leaf fragment, and they're leaf cutter bees. Some that make these sort of like glossy material that can be masked bees. Then there's the wasp mimic bees, which make like these sort of spiderweb looking entrances to their nests. But there is a lot of similarity. There is still, like you said, the blue banded bee and the teddy bear bee. There are still those distinct species that you can tell apart by color. One really distinct species is the carpenter bees, which are just by their sheer size is easy to tell them apart.
Hey, if you like native plants as much as I do, I have a special treat for you. I've created a free Australian native garden design or planting palette. What it is a collection of beautiful Australian native plants that are very adaptable to all different climates within Australia. So if you're stuck with what to plant in your native garden, download your free Australian native garden design. The free download also comes with a bunch of extra information on the steps you'll need to make it flourish. If that sounds like something that you'd like to take advantage of, the link to the free download is in the show notes below this episode. Check it out. Genome sequencing or DNA testing is something that has gone berserk in the plant world, with plants being recategorized because the DNA has shown that they are different species to what they were once thought to be. I can only imagine something similar is happening with native bees.
Yes, absolutely. That's one thing that's it might even it might even bump those 2,000 estimates of the native bee species up even further once we can look at the DNA between different specimens, because it can be hard enough just looking under a microscope trying to tell the differences, and DNA will probably help out that case a lot.
Yeah, I bet. So broadly speaking, what is the life cycle of the native bees? I know there's 2,000 different species, but just generally, what is the life cycle?
So I guess it would start as, so say for a solitary bee, the female will lay either a fertilized egg, which will become a female, or she'll lay an unfertilized egg, which will become a male.
Huh.
And she can sort of pick and choose, which a lot of species can pick and choose which gender they want the eggs to be. So that's how it'll start. They'll find they'll find a nest, like it might be a cavity from a wood boring grub, or they might dig a hole in the ground in a clay bank, or into some sandy sediments or something, and they lay that egg, and then that egg hatches, and it will go through like the larval stage. It'll eat the pollen and nectar resources that the mother has left for that, and then it'll develop within the nest until it's morphed into a smaller baby bee, which it'll quite often chew through the seal of the like chamber that the egg's been laid in, and then it'll come into the outside world, and then start going and visiting flowers, and drinking nectar and collecting pollen for the next generation.
So, how long do native bees live?
Yeah, so this one is up to what species you're looking at, because of the large diversity of native bees in Australia. There's a very big variation in the lifespan of some of the native bees. So you have things like xylocopas, or those big carpenter bees, which some of those females will live over the course of multiple seasons. Like they might live, I don't know if it's 2, 3, 4 years of length. Then you have
Oh, wow.
other species which are much more short lived. So you might have some, I think, like the mast bees or resin bees, which are more seasonal, and you'll get turnover throughout the year. What happens in a lot of native bee species is actually the flying around bee morph of the species doesn't exist over winter, and some bee species will exist as grubs in those bee hotels and cavities and in the ground over winter, and then they emerge as the next generation. So quite
Okay.
often, yeah, there's either multiple generations within a season, or and they're shorter lived, or yeah, they'll be seasonal, or in the rare cases, they'll live for more than 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, right. Oh, wow. Okay. It's quite interesting, really. So, okay, everyone knows what a European honeybee looks like or your regular honeybees look like. But what are the key differences in behavior, habitat, pollination?
So yeah, the key difference between a lot of species of native bees versus honeybees is that a lot of native bees live solitary lifestyles. So there's only 11 species of those 2,000 species which live in hives, and they're known as the stingless bees. And we don't have those in Victoria or anywhere south of Sydney, really. Um,
Okay.
yeah, and even the stingless bees are nothing like the European honeybees, because their hives are like the structure of the brood. It's not like in honeycomb. They do like these really cool spiral structures that it just looks like something out of a sci-fi alien movie. And then the solitary bees, yeah, they're just that. Yeah, obviously they don't live in hives, so they don't have that structure of the queen and the workers and things. There's there's just females that run the show by themselves, but there is a few species that live in a bit of a grey area between social bees and solitary, where they might have uh, a few females that they might share the nest entrance, but they might dig, um, like in a different direction, and sort of have their own like little apartment in a underground complex sort of thing.
So it's
And
almost like a
then
share house or something.
yeah, like a share house, absolutely. So they're
That's
still sort of
fascinating.
solitary, but just live with each other or next to each other as neighbors in aggregations. There's also species like reed bees, where instead of laying an egg and putting some pollen with it and forgetting about it, they actually, so they might have like a bit of a mum club that are feeding babies, or like older sisters that have already hatched and going back. So that there is like a bit of teamwork, but yep, and
Interesting.
so yeah, there can be a bit of teamwork dynamics, but for the most part, they're a lot of the species are solitary. That's one of the key distinguishing differences. Another difference, this is actually like a really cool uh, sort of connection that we have to native bees, is that when settlers invaded Australia, the the first settlers that were setting up the trees and the fruits and the crops and things that they brought over from England and from Europe, they couldn't work out why the fruits were failing. So they were like, what's going on? Like why aren't they getting pollinated, or like what's happening? So then they brought over the honeybees with them to fix the issue. Why that's sort of the case is that honeybees have long tongues. So they're part of this family Apidae, which is long tongue bees. So that's like a key feature of the honeybees, and the blue banded bees in this same family. So this is also long tongue.
Okay.
But what was happening was, because a lot of the native bee species are short tongue, and that's one thing that's unique to Australia, really, is that a lot of the diversity of native bees are short tongue bees. So these species, they didn't really care about the European crops that European people were bringing over. They just were happy to pollinate native plants, and that's why it's so good to plant native plants for native bees. Native bees are just always sort of specialized and adapted to pollinating native plants.
Interesting. So they then, for agricultural purposes, they don't actually serve us humans much in terms of our food cycle.
Yeah, I like to call it unpaid work. because there still is a lot of unpaid labor from native bees that goes into crops,
Okay.
but it's obviously not like a preference of them. Native bees, like if they've got eucalypts in flower or the different indigenous plants to the area, they're obviously going to pick that over pollinating the crops. But there is still a lot of unpaid labor that native bees are giving agriculture. There's also a really high efficiency of when, say, you get a flower and you get 10 different native bees to pollinate that flower, that's much more efficient than getting 10 honeybees to pollinate that same flower, because the difference in the morphology of the native bees and their sizes and how they go about pollinating and the different the different techniques and behaviors of native bees, that they create a much more efficient pollination. So, and that also goes into our gardens and our crops and things too.
So, what role do native bees play in Australia's ecosystem? How crucial are they for pollination and biodiversity?
There's no understating the importance of bees in the world. There's hundreds of thousands of different species of flowering plants, which to some extent rely on pollination to create their fruits and their seeds, and continue reproducing. And particularly in the Australian context, we've got tens of thousands of species of flowering plants. And one thing that I love that I haven't touched on yet is this thing called buzz pollination or sonication. And these are I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say tight ass, but the flowers that are a bit tight ass with their pollen, and so they make it a bit harder to release their pollen. They don't just like display it for any Tom, Dick, and Harry to come and collect. So these flowers, and this includes your herbaceae, your solanum, like blueberries, or the dianella, the flax
Yeah.
lilies, and so these flowers need to be shaken vigorously before they release the pollen, so that not any insect can just go and raid their resources. So they make it hard, and this is across the world. About 11 to 12% of flowering plants are buzz pollinated, and this is something that honeybees cannot do. So you need
Ah,
native bees. Like the blue banded bee is a great example of a buzz pollinator. The teddy bear bee, the carpenter bees, the even some small like lasioglossums and lipotriches can buzz pollinate. And so what happens here? There's two ways which native bees buzz pollinate. The first way is they'll grab onto the anthers of the flower or somewhere where they can get a good hold of it, and they'll vibrate their flight muscles without actually flapping their wings.
wow.
So you can imagine I'm 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 doing it I'm doing it right now, but I'm not on video. So but so the a native bee, yeah, they'll be flapping their wings like nuts, but their wings don't move. So instead of their wings moving, their body just shakes like really really quickly. And so this is what will release the pollen out of the native flowers. And then you've also got a different form of buzz pollination, which is the blue banner bees. And this is why you might have heard of or been you might have heard of blue banner bees being compared to a heavy metal band, because their strategy is headbanging, and so they vibrate muscles in their thorax, which causes their head to sort of headbutt the flower parts that they're holding onto, and yeah, this vibrates the flowers and releases the pollen. So yeah, this is literally about 300 times a second that
Whoa.
they do this. So they're headbanging very quickly. It's just incredible stuff.
Gee.
And so yeah, well, bringing it back to the question why native bee is important. Yeah, if we didn't have native bees, especially the ones which are able to buzz pollinate, there goes the 12% of species of flowering plants in Australia that need buzz pollination.
Well, then they're critically important.
Oh, absolutely. And there's so many of these specialist interactions as well, because you've got millions of years of flowering plants getting pollinated by, native bees. So you can imagine how some of these interactions over time get more and more advanced and efficient. So there's some plant species that will only have really specialized pollinators that have adapted over those millions of years to pollinating that plant. And same goes for native bees. There's some groups of species, like what I was saying with the short tongue bees, like the mast bees and Euryglossa and these sorts of like little groups of genera or species, they might only have one flowering plant species or one flowering plant genera or family that they look for, and that's what they've adapted to pollinating. You disrupt that interaction, and then you lose the other. Like they rely on each other.
Yeah, it's like a symbiotic relationship between them where
Yeah, absolutely.
one will if you lose the native bee, you lose the plant species as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is it's quite fascinating, but also quite scary just with the, kind of direction that Australia's going with deforestation and everything. It's quite important to protect them, I suppose. Um,
Oh, absolutely.
so speaking of Australia, it's a big country, so many different ecosystems. How have bees adapted to the country's diverse and often very harsh conditions?
Yeah, that's a great question. In Australia, we have a lot of ground nesting bee species. I'm not sure if this is because the ground's everywhere, versus needing a dead log or something to
Mhm.
find to nest in. But so we've got a lot of ground nesting species, and in some of
Is that
the
fairly unique to Australia?
I think across the world, I think it tends to be more uh, ground nesting bees than cavity
Okay.
nesting. But yeah, in Australia, we have around 60 to 70% of the species will nest in the ground, and some of these bee species will literally dig like over a meter, some up to 3 meters into the ground before they create the cells where they're going to lay their eggs.
So bees are so small. How do they actually dig? They're 3 to 5 millimeters. I guess they're not like insanely strong compared to mammals and whatnot. How do they dig?
Well, I think that some of the species have a bit more adapted legs for digging, so that they definitely use their legs. And you'll see the amygdallas or the blue banded bees. They'll be scratching around with their front legs, and then they'll like put it in reverse and go back down the hole, to scoop the dirt out and stuff. But yeah, it does amaze me. You're right. Some of the smaller bees, like 3 5 millimeters, like the size of one of your fingernails, and they're digging these great distances down deep.
That's amazing. So it would maybe in like Arnhem Land or somewhere where they get like a heavy wet season, are they less ground dwelling bees?
No, not necessarily, because
Okay.
they can, yeah, ground nesting bees can create like a sort of a cement mixture between like the walls, because they'll sort of line the walls as well on the way down. That creates so that, yeah, if it rains, the sand's not just going to like collapse on itself or whatever.
Cool. What are the main threats that native bee populations are facing?
So there's quite a range of different threats that native bees are facing in Australia, Michael. And one of the things in particular, which I could link back to how we were speaking of on before, the different specialist interactions between native bees and the plants they pollinate. And when you have these interactions which have formed over millions and millions of years, and you have these bees which are sort of active at those similar times of years when those flowers are expected to be flowering, and then climate change has sort of come in and thrown a lot of these interactions out of whack a little bit, especially for those specialist species which rely on flowers to occur at a particular time of year. And this is one thing that we've seen with the stingless sugarbag bees in the Northern Territory, which they love the stringy barks or the goodacres in the area. And in the last few years, there's been some really unexpected flowering of the goodacres, and this is something that's been happening later and later each year. So these stingless bees are emerging when they should typically expect to find the stringy barks, and then they haven't been flowering yet. And this has put a massive pressure on the limited time where stingless bees are able to go out and forage for nectar and pollen to raise the next generation and create honey and contribute to the hive's overall health and well-being. And this has put a lot of pressure. And so this is just one of the threats. Another one which has been really, really devastating, especially in recent decades, the last 30 years or so, you can see a massive decline in insects as a whole, really across the world. About
Mm.
40% of the abundance we've lost right across the world in all insects. A study's come out that, yeah, since that the country has been settled in Australia, we've lost about 9,000 species of invertebrates to extinction completely. And yeah, lots of this has come through like land clearing for agriculture and housing development. But more recently, pesticides and insecticides and herbicides and all of the chemicals and pollutants that we use for large scale agriculture and monoculture has been just devastating. You have these things like neonicotinoids and neonics, which are just absolutely devastating the insects right across Australia, because obviously they're very, very effective pesticides to treat the different insects and things that might get into the crops. But obviously they don't discriminate, and they're more than happy to kill bee populations and the ones that are leaching into the waterways, and
Mm.
they're getting into the soils, and they're creating much longer lasting effects than just the specific target species that they're intended for. So yeah, that's one thing that's really devastating.
The lifespan of these chemicals can be, years. Some chemicals will be undetectable in the soil in a day or two, but some of the really strong ones can last in soil for years to come. So I can see how that is a pretty scary fate for like our burrowing bees and whatnot.
Absolutely. And that's one of the questions that people come up with straight away is how are they allowed to use these pesticides or insecticides? And quite often they are they appear to be potentially harmless in the short term, uh, and once they accumulate, or they might be causing behavioural effects, or they might be causing multi generational effects that we're not they're not instantly killing the insect species, but this is something we find out in retrospect. So that's why a lot of these things get the green light straight away, and it takes us a little while to realize how bad they are.
Yeah, we'll put profits up first, and then we'll work out how to deal with the issues down the track. It's kind of
Unfortunately,
just about everything in human life is it's easier to put band-aids on problems down the track than actually do the correct testing to make sure that these things are actually safe. Even for us as people, like they are still going into our bodies as well. So, okay, what type of habitats do native bees actually prefer? And how can gardeners kind of recreate that bee friendly space at home?
yeah. So that's one thing that I like to encourage is that you want to be trying to simulate as best you can the sort of environments and habitats where native bees would nest in if they're in a completely natural remnant habitat. And this is things like the holes from wood boring grubs in bits of dead wood and old eucalyptus trees. This is pithy stems and hollow stems of native wildflowers and grasses. This is fern fronds. This is clay and sandy banks on the sides of rivers. And so the ways that we can simulate this to create a native bee haven in our own backyards is we can drill into native hardwood with drill bits to make these tunnels, which wood boring grubs and beetles would make for native bees. Another way is to not prune off all the dead flowers and throw that in the green waste, but to leave those flower stems, and the dead blades of grass and sedges and things, and instead of clearing all this away, because we have this thing about how tidy we want our gardens to look, but a little bit of mess can be that habitat that's crucial to native bees. And then the last sort of side of things is to make your garden friendly for ground nesting bees. And one way you can do
Okay.
this is don't have seriously thick layers of mulch. Uh,
Hmm.
and you also want to leave bare patches of soils and clay and sand where possible, because this is going to leave it open for the ground nesting bees to dig into.
You want to not be completely immaculate with your garden. Let a little bit of mess come in, I suppose. Let it be a little bit wild to have a little bit of bare soil for your ground nesting bees. And you don't want to be using any pesticides or
Yes, exactly right.
weed killer or anything like that through the space because, I mean, that's just, counterproductive.
Yeah, exactly right. And the alternatives to this is you want to best try and create a balance in your ecosystem. You want the predatory wasps and the parasitic wasps. You want different flies. You want beetles. You want everything to sort of create that balance. There is some really damaging pests that people have in their gardens. So there's things like the mites and the aphids and the caterpillars and these things. And so this is why you want to try and create that ecosystem balance. But alternatives I have seen to pesticides and insecticides, which seem really promising, I've seen lately, is the use of, they call them like bugs for bugs, or you can literally order
Yes.
in or buy predatory insects that you can deploy into your garden. So if you have aphids, you can order online lady beetles, which get sent to your door that you can release into your garden to be like a, biological
Biocontrol.
control. Yeah, yeah,
That's it. I've actually used that with my in my home garden, but also in my landscape clients' gardens as well. And
yeah,
it's not a surefire thing all the time, but if you put in the time to it of making sure that when you get those bugs, that they have somewhere to feed and creating the habitat for them, then they actually are a really long-lasting, beautiful, safe way to go. I know people get a bit scared
yeah.
of the
That's just brilliant,
biocontrols.
isn't it?
I think they're great. I think they're really good. Actually, the Bugs for Bugs website is a fantastic resource, even just to have a look and see what bugs you want to attract to your garden to fight other garden pests that you don't want. I suppose
Mm,
if we're going
mm.
down that track too, there's a heap of safe mechanical methods, like with aphids. You can squish them between your fingers. You can, hit them off with a hose, things like that. Because you actually, I think, to create a beautiful ecosystem, you do want those pests there, because if you just get rid of them constantly, you're not going to be attracting any of those like ladybugs or anything that is going to be beneficial in the long run for bigger pest problems.
Exactly
So
right.
yeah, you're right. It's all
And
about balance. It's all about balance.
it's like people say, I hate wasps, but then at the same time they say I hate caterpillars. So
Yeah,
the same caterpillars that are tearing apart your silver beets, there's a wasp that's out there that's native to Australia that's going to come in and parasitize those caterpillars and look after your silver beets. And so there's like heaps of these different things that are intertwined that you don't really want to take out, that part of the food chain, because like something's going to support something, even if it is a pest. Or if when you get that ecosystem control in your garden, it's not one of those pests isn't going to flare up and create real problems like it would if there wasn't that balance.
that's it. I have like a saying that I tell my clients, which is like, you're generally the biggest pest in your garden. They
Yeah,
might want you to come in and and spray everything and make sure there's no bugs anywhere or no spiders or whatever it is. And you're like, well, no, because they have a job to do. And by you doing that, you're just creating bigger problems down the road. Um, but yeah, anyway, we kind of got a little bit off track there, but that's okay. You are a massive advocate for creating bee hotels at home. I think you've got some resources online for a free download. Is that right? On how to create native
yep.
bee hotels? Why don't you run us through some really simple ways that we can make some pollinator hotels?
That's my whole outlook, trying to make it as simple as possible, because I'm not someone that loves to read a whole lot. I'm always been a picture story kind of guy, and
Me too.
I've tried to make it, yeah, as simple as possible, but still at the same time really optimize how the quality of habitat actually is for the potential inhabitants. And so I've got three main ways that I create bee hotels, or three sort of designs really. And these are about trying best to simulate the natural environment. And so the first one of these designs is by getting bits of hardwood, just simple like sort of logs that you might use for fire, or laying branches that have fallen off a tree, anything like that, and simply just drilling different sized diameters of holes to make the little tunnels that wood boring grubs would typically make in dead wood that native bees would find a nest in. And I used drill bits from 3 mils to about 8 or 9 mils. That's about as big as you'll need. And I get extra long drill bits because then they've got more room inside the tunnels to lay the eggs and create the cells.
Hmm.
And you could use even smaller than 3 mils. You think that's a tiny little drill bit, but I promise you there are native bees out there small enough to use these holes. I would use even smaller drill bits, but I get too angry when I keep snapping them. So I find that 3 mils is about where they start to get a little bit strong.
Yeah.
And so that's the first design. The second design is to create bundles of things like, fern fronds, hollow stems. If you have lantana laying around, or blueberries, or reeds or bamboo, anything that's sort of hollow or pithy that you can just create bundles of. And yeah, but you can maybe put it inside a vessel like some PVC pipe or a tin can.
Hmm.
And these, same again, about at least 100 mils of length to give it plenty of room for the bees to nest in. And yeah, in a similar fashion to the first design of drilling the hardwood, it's good to leave these two off the ground where there's going to be some native bee traffic. So maybe in a nice flowering patch or near some eucalypts or something in a good spot. And then you'll
Hmm.
want to face the ends of the holes to the north or the northeast. It's very important that they get morning sun, and they're
Okay.
not scorched by the afternoon heat. And at the same time, they're not facing the south, because that's where the mold and the mildew will want to collect, and the moisture. And they're little insects. They love the sunlight when they're waking up, and the flowers are going to be full of nectar and pollen. That's when they want to start attacking the day, seizing the day. So face them to the north northeast when you do set them up. And lastly, the third design, and this can sort of depend on how much room you have in the garden, or if you are set on having mulch everywhere, because you can simply just leave bare patches of clay and sand soil for the bees to find and dig into, because this last design is for specialized for ground nesting bees like the blue banded bees. That's a lot of people's favorites, as well as 70% of those 2,000 native bee species that will live in the ground. But sometimes people can actually make a bee hotel out of mixing clay and sand. I like to mix the sand in there as well, because you've seen what happens when clay hardens. It turns into like pretty much concrete or ceramics. So it's good to have that little bit of sand in there, that they'll have a bit of grit so they can dig when it does dry out. And similar again, in a nice little patch of the garden, we'll receive some sunlight that might have a little bit of shelter. So that's the
So
the
you
three designs.
you don't put in the holes yourself, then you wait for the bees to do that themselves in that last one.
It sort of depends, because yeah, sometimes the different ground nesting bee species will come and find it anyway. Whereas the blue banded bees, you can give a bit of a head start by just poking like a centimeter or two of the tip of a pencil or something. But yeah, ground nesting bees will find it themselves and dig their own nests and chambers and things into it. But you can give them a head start with a pencil or whatever.
So I will link that in the show notes below to your
Yep.
guide to do that, so people can build it for themselves, which is very fun.
Yep. And I was just going to say, and as like a added bonus or like extra design, not specifically for bees, but how we're talking before about you can like leave a little bit of mess in your garden, or don't go extra hard on pruning the dead flowers or whatever. One thing that I've seen, which is a really good idea, is creating like these little bug hubs. And this is simply when people have like a bunch of cuttings or little branches or anything, just have like a little corner of your garden somewhere where you just have a pile of it and stack it up. And that can just be like just a nice little habitat out of the way, like out of sight, out of mind, where different invertebrates and insects can use as habitat. Because you'll see people, like you've seen when you're composting, or you have your piles of leaves that you've raked away or whatever, and if you leave it be for a few weeks, when you go to move it, there's stuff crawling out of it everywhere. Like, so
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And so sometimes it's good to just have like a little designated thing. And this is where that creating the ecosystem that's balanced in your garden can come from, by just having that little bit extra habitat, or catering for just a little bit more of a diversity in your garden. It goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually a really simple way to go then. Just touching back on your research, what are some of your most exciting discoveries that you have found about native bees?
I think, well, potentially the most exciting, which hasn't been quite confirmed yet, is the fact that I've discovered species which have been potentially undescribed.
Ooh,
Because one thing in native bee taxonomy is that a lot of like the taxonomy and classifications of records of native bees is really outdated. So there's the species that are sitting in museum drawers which haven't been formally identified, and things like this. And so I brought back a couple interesting specimens where, when we're trying to identify them, we were thinking, yeah, this is really difficult to identify. Like, there's not really anything that's matching with this. And when we've said to experts in the bee taxonomy world, they've said, "Oh, yeah, well, you've probably found new species there." So if that does eventually become confirmed, that would be super, super exciting.
that would be amazing. What do you
Oh,
get? Do you get to
absolutely
name it?
incredible. Potentially. So there was one bee which was extra shiny, and we consulted with the indigenous people in the area, the Yolngu,
Mm-hmm.
because it was really shiny. So we asked them what is shiny in their local Yolngu Martha, which was Malincton. So I'd love to try and sneak that into the formal classification if that one does turn out to be a new species. But yeah,
Nice.
we'd love to, if we had any sound the names. It wouldn't be the Clancy Lester bee. No way. I would be definitely trying to incorporate the indigenous recognition of the reason why I got to even do my research in the first place.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great.
So my other really cool finding is just the fact that what we've been doing is we've been collecting the bees, and we've been taking the pollen off each of the bees' legs or abdomens, wherever their scopa is holding on to the pollen, and we've been running the DNA on the pollen, and
Oh,
we've been able to track each of the bees based on what flowers they've been visiting, based on the pollen that they carry. So this pollen, this bee that we have, and it has the pollen from, this flower and this flower and this flower, and we can make like this massive, massive network of all the different flowers that these bees are visiting, and all of the different bees that visit each one of the flowers. And that, it just blows my mind how, from this DNA metabarcoding that we're doing on the pollen, we can create these networks. It's just incredible.
that's fascinating. Does that mean you're kind of seeing almost like a pattern of where they're going and how far they're able to go?
Yes, yeah, exactly right. So we're able to look at the native bee communities in each of the locations where we've done the sampling, to see if they've got different preferences in the flowers that they're collecting pollen from. And then we can also look at, whether or not those bees are typically, say we've collected a bee that's been getting pollen from a range of different flowers, and then we look into the information behind that bee and think, oh, this bee is meant to be only sort of getting pollen from this. So we can expand like what's known about the host taxa, plants of these bees, because we have so much of this knowledge at our fingertips now with DNA. The records used to be based off the plant species where the bees were captured from, because that was the only sure way of knowing what plant species that bee species had visited. But now we can just,
Mm,
we can pick up a bee, grab the DNA from the pollen and go, yep, it goes to this flower, this flower, collects all the pollen, just like that.
that's
It's
amazing.
incredible.
That is incredible. And I suppose there's you really just at the, tip of the iceberg on trying to work out all of that,
Very,
which
yeah,
is
very early
fascinating.
stages.
Yeah. Does that mean there's not actually that many people in your field? Is it a pretty limited field?
There's absolutely stuff all, yeah. So with
Yeah.
native bee taxonomy, I think in Australia currently, there's 6 native bee taxonomists. And I think out of those 6,
Wow.
I think there's only 2 or 3 who are actually getting paid. So the other ones are volunteers that have retired, that are just doing it because they love bees. Like, there seems to be a lot of money and research getting invested into pollination, particularly for crops and things.
Mm.
But yeah, it's definitely a bit of a dying art at the moment.
You can turn that around for everyone. At least
Well, that's what
single-handedly,
I'm trying to do.
hey?
Yeah, raising, it
Perfect.
starts with raising awareness. Starts with
That's right.
the the public consensus, and when when like when the people that are higher up with all the money and resources realize how much people care about bees and how important they are and this sort of thing, that's when the investments will occur and the resources
And
will be
change will
provided
actually
to.
start to happen.
Absolutely.
So I guess on that note, it's this question might be a little redundant, but are there many community projects going on revolving around the conservation of native bees?
So I see a bit of this happening. Yeah, there's definitely on smaller scales in like community groups, because there seems to be now there's like a lot of this public available information about how to make bee hotels and how to make your garden a haven for pollinators. It seems to be on like the grassroots level really, but I've seen a few things with a few like sort of projects which I really love. There's the Melbourne Pollinator Corridor, or the Ween Bee Foundation, which makes like catered pollinator planting guides based on your postcode. There's like things like iNaturalist projects, like the Ground Nesting Bee project. There's different organisations that go to schools that run workshops, like the planting seeds and the B&B Highway.
On that note, you are launching your own pollinator environmental education program. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's something that I've really got really passionate about towards the end of last year, after this, sort of dipping my toes into the waters of environmental education and inspiring the next generation of kids to really fall in love with native bees and insects and pollinators. So I'd started going to schools as a part of a project for native bee conservation. And yeah, this is something that I've been doing this year as now a ABC Trailblazer. And yeah, I've been going to schools, especially rural and regional schools that might not have the opportunity to get people like scientists to come in and learn from. And it's been super awesome.
Tell me about the ABC Trailblazer.
Yeah, so the ABC Trailblazers is this thing ran by Haywire, which is part of the ABC, and it's for
Hmm.
kids which have grown up in rural and regional areas which have just done cool stuff. So there's some people that get involved in arts, and some people that get involved in music or activism or the environment or climate change, and they've gone off and started these amazing projects that they have a passion for. And so you go to Parliament for a week and you go through a summit, and talk about sort of the problem that you might be in love with or what you're doing to create change. And then you go on this journey as a trailblazer to to create change and to just really focus on what you're passionate about, and they have all these resources and media opportunities and things to provide to continually grow and reach new heights with the project that you're passionate about.
Well, you certainly have an incredibly bright future ahead of you. Where can people find you online and learn about a little bit more about what you do?
See, I post prolifically nowadays on
You
my
do.
Instagram, which is beesandblossoms.oz, as well as my TikTok. So they've got the same handle, beesandblossoms.oz. And then I've also got my website, nativebeehotels.com.
I really would recommend everyone go out there and follow Clancy on Instagram and TikTok because the content is world class. It's amazing. You make really good informational stuff.
Thanks,
I
Michael.
love it.
And I'm tipping that most of the people listening to this have already got the Gardener's Lodge, because I'd recommend the same straight back at you.
Oh, oh, thank you very
Get
much.
onto the
Thank you.
Gardener's Lodge, everybody.
Clancy Lester, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really, really, really appreciate it.
Thanks very much for having me, Michael. It's been an absolute honour.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you like the show, don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button. Tell a friend or two, or maybe even give the show a 5-star rating and a review. If you want more Gardener's Lodge content, you can find our website, our Instagram and our TikTok in the show notes below this episode. The Gardener's Lodge podcast is a growing media production.